of Realtors. I'd like to welcome you all to our webinar on the EB5 Immigrant Investor Visa Program. Our panelist today is Debbie Klis with Ballard Spahr Law Firm in DC. Debbie has a primarily financial and corporate practice, and of course presents and publishes and has speaking engagements quite extensively related to the EB5 program. If you have questions as she moves through the presentation, you'll find a question box on the right-hand side of your screen. You can just type your question in, and we'll pause periodically throughout the presentation to pose those questions to Debbie. So at this point, I will go ahead and turn it over to Debbie.
Thank you, Lori. Good morning, everyone. Is my sound good, Lori?
Sounds good to me.
Okay, great. All right. Well, thank you for having me. We'll jump right in, turning to slide 2. Okay, so EB stands for employment-based. It's an employment-based visa program created by Congress in the 90s to stimulate foreign investment in the United States. So that's simply it. It's a visa program. So foreign investors put money into the United States and with the goal of creating jobs. And in return, they get a green card. It's a green card. It's a permanent green card. Initially, it's a temporary green card for 2 years, and when they demonstrate that they've created the jobs, then it becomes a permanent green card. And after they're here a full 5 years, they can apply for citizenship. The jobs they must create are sorry, on my side, I heard something strange. They must create full-time jobs that are either what they call direct jobs, or as I'll talk about a little bit later, they can also create what's called indirect or induced jobs, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. When Congress created the program, it was $1 million jobs. Excuse me, it was $1 million investment in exchange for 10 jobs. That's when the program was originally created. Over time, to stimulate more investment, because the program was not very popular initially, Congress did a tweak to the program and created something called TEAs, Targeted Employment Areas. And if the project is located in a targeted employment area, the investment would only need to be $500,000. And we can talk about what a targeted employment area is. So a targeted employment area is either a rural area, so it would be an area where the population is 20,000 or below, so that, in the Maryland, DC, Virginia, West Virginia area, it would be, more towns, kind of in outer county areas, or it would be in parts of, Washington, DC, PG County, other, Northern Virginia areas that are in census tracts that have higher unemployment. In this case, it has to be 150% of the national average. So what we do is we look at the national average of unemployment for the prior year. So if the national average unemployment for the prior year, which I think for 2015 was 6.2, the census tract where the project is would have to be 9.3 to be at 150%. If your census tract is not at that, sometimes you can sort of kind of get it to fit another way by if it's right on the border or near census tracts that are struggling. So say, for example, you have a project in Baltimore, and it's not that exact census tract is in a TEA, but it's very close to census tracts that are, we can show that, a lot of the people that will be coming to fill those jobs are coming from TEAs, and we can get it to work that way. So that's sort of a side note, but very important to remember. So when Congress created the program, so whether you're in a TEA at $500,000 per investor or not in a TEA at $1 million, either way, each investor must create 10 jobs. and those 10 jobs have to be shown at the end of 2 years, and then the green card becomes permanent. Congress also cared very much, about the source of funds. So there's, during the 2 years, while the projects, creating the jobs, the U.S. Immigration is doing, the background paperwork on the investor and looking at how they source their money and whatnot to make sure that everything is valid. Okay, so what type of projects qualify? Well, when Congress initially created the program, real estate really wasn't on their mind. It was sort of envisioned that, Debbie and Lori were, had their, clothing store or something, and they might use EB5 to, bring in a couple investors and, branch out and open 3 more stores and create, true, additional W-2 holding jobs. But over time, people realized that, this works just great for real estate. So significantly, disproportionately, the EB5 projects around the U.S. are in real estate. And so the type of projects that I see are really all over the place. I mean, it's heavily used in office and office space and retail. In office, a lot of times you see upgrades. Like I had a big project in New York, converting a Class B commercial to Class A. So the building owner, as tenants were leaving, that he didn't renew, as tenants' leases were up, he was not permitting them to renew, and he would go in and renovate, use EB5 money to renovate the spaces, their space in the common areas, and then turned it into a Class A building, could release it out at Class A market rents and significantly increase the value. Or you can also build new buildings, shopping centers, strip malls. There's a lot in the hotel, university dorms. I've worked on ski villages and ski resorts. It's very popular in the casino space because there's a lot of jobs there. It's really up and coming in the senior care and hospitals. I'm working on a lot of projects right now in the drug treatment facility space, sports stadiums. I think the Brooklyn Nets Stadium in New York has EB5 on there. The Maryland Live Casino had 100 million of EB5, or maybe even a little more, something like that. And then, lately it's really been up and coming in the residential space. Historically people thought that, it wouldn't work on residential because if it's not mixed use, if you don't have retail on site, there's no direct jobs. So I'll explain in a little bit why it can work. So, in the last 18 months to 2 years, I've done many projects in the apartment, condo, single family home, even low-income housing or affordable housing space. I have a client using it extensively for solar projects out west. And then it also is still being used in the non-real estate space, grocery stores where there's really minimal, like they'll go into an existing space and have very little, retail aspect of it. It's really just an operating business, charter schools, grocery stores, service business, that sort of thing. So it's that's the type of projects that we're seeing. Okay, probably before I get to my next slide. So why is it so popular? This is a good time to say, why is it so popular? Well, if you're looking to either acquire a building or renovate a building, or you know that you're most likely going to be able to get senior lending for maybe 50-60% or more of the project, but it's always that mezzanine piece, that gap that you're trying to fill, that every developer struggles with, and how big that gap is and how much you're struggling with will vary on a project by project basis. And so what EB5 has done is it has opened up to developers a brand new source of capital, these foreign investors that we never had access to before. And two, it's more affordable money. If you were to go out to investors here in the U.S., you know, they're typically looking for a fixed rate of return that's not so cheap. It could be 7, 8, 9, 10%, you know, fixed pref that they're looking for, you know, depending on the risk. Plus, they're looking for a piece of the waterfall. You know, when you exit the investment down the road, they expect a piece of the upside. EB5 is priced completely differently, and EB5, the fixed return is very, very low. Right now, it's about 0.5%, 0.50%, and about 2 to 3% per year to the marketing agents that help you find the investors. Sometimes a little bit more, but if so, it's maybe just for 1 year. Like there's one agent that charges 4%, but only for 1 year. So it varies a little bit, but you can usually all in find EB5 for somewhere around 3 to 4% money and no upside. So, and it's usually 5-year money with one or two 1-year extensions. So, you know, it's just a lot cheaper, no upside, and again, you know, you're getting access to investors you didn't have before. So that explains why it's so popular. So I explained originally that when Congress first created the program, it was just envisioned that, you know, EB5 investors would come, you know, directly into U.S. businesses, and invest, create jobs, and, you know, go on their way. And then over time, you know, smart developers started using it for real estate. Well, then to stimulate more use of it, Congress created something called regional centers. And that brings me to the slide that's on your screen now. You might have heard something about regional centers. So a regional center is nothing more than an LLC or LP, a limited partnership or limited liability company that, you know, you form in the state where your project is, or, you know, where you're located, and you file an application with the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Service, the USCIS, and ask to be designated as a regional center. You know, the application is pretty thick, and, you know, it takes a, you know, few weeks to a month to put together, but then the immigration has to review and approve it. But then once it's approved, you're allowed to then accept foreign investors' money and deploy it into a project. So why become a regional center? Well, now it's getting back to why residential projects can work for EB5, even if there are no actual direct jobs on site. Because when you're doing an EB5 project through a regional center instead of directly, then you get credit for indirect and induced jobs. So I hope I haven't lost anyone. Don't worry, I'll explain this. Okay, so there's really, if we look at slide 6, there's really 4 key ways to use EB5, and I'll walk through them now. We've already talked about the 4th bullet point, which is direct investment. So in a direct investment, you know, say, you know, Lori and Debbie want to build a building in, you know, downtown Baltimore, and it has, you know, 5 levels of apartments and retail at the lobby level. If we did it by direct investment, we would only get job credit for the W-2 holding jobs in the ground level, and we would get credit for construction jobs if construction lasted 2 years or more, because, you know, the jobs have to be 2-year jobs. So a project of that size would never last 2 years or more of construction, so it would not be a good choice for us to structure it as a direct investment. So you almost never see real estate projects as direct investment. That's why regional centers are so popular. So Lori and I would not even consider the last bullet point. We would just consider the first 3. Okay, so Lori and I would say, well, should we form our own regional center? Which means we would prepare an application and file it, and this way we own our own regional center. There would be no middle person, and we would run our own show, or we could contact regional centers already approved in Baltimore, and therefore they would go out and raise the money and loan to us just like a bank. Or we could rent a regional center, which means we go to a regional center that's already approved in Baltimore, and it's sort of a hybrid of one and two. When you rent a regional center, it's arm's length like owning one, in the sense that, after they've done due diligence on your project, you kind of run your own show, and so it's cheaper, more like owning a regional center, except that it's only on a one-off basis. In the future, you wouldn't be able to do more deals with it. You'd have to rent it again, but it is cheaper than getting a loan from a regional center. So we're gonna slow down now and talk about each of these. I should probably pause to see if anybody's had questions so far, Lori.
There are not any written-in questions at this point, but I have to tell you, I'm getting kind of excited for these projects you and I are cooking up here. And perhaps you'll cover this later in your presentation, but I'm curious if one of our members out there either knows of a project that could benefit from, some type of a foreign investment component, or know of someone who's interested in making an investment, someone who's interested in coming to this country, making this type of investment, is your first real piece of advice to them is to contact an attorney who is very thoroughly knowledgeable in EB5 to kind of help guide them through the process?
Yes, and actually I offer this service free of charge. My email's on the front cover, and what I say is, at no charge, if you send me an email, and of course I'd keep it confidential, if you said, I'm looking at this project, and what I need to know is three things: the address, because I would tell you if it's in it. I have an economist that helps me, but I would need the address, and I could tell you if it's in a TEA or not, because, and I was going to get to this, is that, disproportionately all the projects done in the U.S. are in TEAs, because if you think about it, if you're in, any country in the world and you're considering using this program, to immigrate to the U.S., and you have, 3 or 4 deals in front of you, and why would you pick the $1 million one if you can pick the $500,000 one? So it's really, it's really hard to do projects at $1 million, and unless there's something really unique about them. So I don't really recommend doing the $1 million projects. And so when clients or potential clients come to me, I often say, I wouldn't recommend doing it unless you already, but some cases people know the potential investors. I have a meeting on Thursday, exactly that. They need just $3 million, and they know the people, they from their home country, and I've done those types of deals a few times, and that's the exception to the rule, and the investors feel very comfortable doing it because they know the people, they know it's going to be a trustworthy investment, and that's fine. But otherwise, if you're really truly marketing at arm's length, it's hard. So anyway, if you emailed me, you gave me 1, the address, 2, just give me a 1 or 2 sentence description. It's going to be a mixed use or hospitality, square footage, and if you could give me a ballpark of what you think the hard and soft costs are, independent of land acquisition, I could write you back and let you know whether it's in a TEA and the ballpark of the number of jobs you're creating. Because I could say, well, if you're creating, 800 jobs at 10 jobs per investor, that's 80 jobs, and we never let you borrow up to the maximum because, if you come up short, somebody gets deported. But so say you had 80 jobs and we left, 10% on the table. So let's say that's 70 jobs. That's 70 investors, at 500,000, that's 35 million. That's good. That's where you could raise 35 million on that project. So that's what I could do for you if you wrote to me, and there's no charge for that. I do that for everybody for free, So this way, before you have to spend any money, or you can see how EB5 would work for that project, or maybe it's $4 million or $5 million or something like that. So that's something we do for no problem. But yeah, that's really the first step, is to see, does it make sense for your project? Does your job creation, is it a TEA, and does your job creation, fill that job delta, that you're looking for on your project?
Okay, so we are getting some written in questions and comments. One actually is just a comment in requesting to maybe switch your computer screen to the slideshow mode so that the slide fills up the entire screen, just to make it a little bit more readable.
My pleasure.
But beyond that, it looks like several people want a little bit more information, a little bit more explanation on the regional centers, on what those...
We were going to go through that right now. That's actually where we were.
Okay.
We just sort of segued, but that's with the slide that's up right now.
Okay, very good. And someone is asking, how does investing in a casino come under real estate?
It does if you built it. Yeah, if it was a ground up. Yeah, in fact, I actually have a brand new project right now. Right as soon as it's called the Red 11, I have a call on that. I represent the regional center that's going to be making a $36 million loan in a senior position in this case, which is rare. EB5 is usually subordinate, but in this case, it's a loan. If it's ground up, I mean, EB5 in real estate is often, for ground up, but it also could be for renovations and expansion. So for a casino, it could be for a brand new one, where it's in the case of Maryland Live, Maryland Live's job creation numbers were off the charts because it was a ground up development. So let me talk about indirect and induced jobs. So when Congress created the regional center concept, they were trying to stimulate more use of EB5, because still, even with the creation of the EB5 program and then the creation of the TEA aspect, where they reduced the investment to $500,000, still people weren't using it that much. So then they created the regional center program, and the only real difference is that you also get credit for indirect and induced jobs. And here's the best way I can explain that, and then I'll dig deeper into regional centers. I had a project out west. It was a 3-phase project. Phase 1 was an office building with outdoor like 1 or 2 level restaurants with courtyards and so on, so in a major city, in a sort of a blighted area. It's very pretty now. Phase 2 was a beautiful new hotel adjacent to office building, and then phase 3 was new high-end apartments above the hotel. So apartments, it created 3 new jobs, and those were for maintenance folks that would be on call to handle repairs at the apartments. But there were $60 million of approved EB5 hard and soft costs, and so the project qualified for $25 million of EB5 money. And every project done through a regional center requires an economist report. And if you did an EB5 project, or a client of yours did, the economist would review your projected hard and soft costs and your revenue projections and your uses and so forth, and they would prepare an economist report. And they're not that expensive. Different economists charge different amounts, but on average they're about $12,000 to $15,000 per project, which if you're getting 10, 20, 30, 80 million, it's pennies. But the report calculates, and that's what your attorney then relies on for what you're entitled to. But they calculate based on your hard costs, your soft costs, and every census tract in the U.S. has a local multiplier. So they use this approved software, and they come up with a job number. So based on, you know, the 60 million of hard and soft costs, even the fact that there were only 3 jobs on site and construction was less than 2 years, so we didn't even get the construction jobs, but just on the indirect and induced jobs alone. So what are indirect and induced jobs? Well, indirect jobs are really that 60 million of hard and soft costs are the indirect jobs. It's when the project goes out and spends that money on materials, supplies, you know, architects, plumbers, lawyers, you know, windows and materials and the crane and all that. Those are the indirect jobs. You know, they're hard to quantify, but, you know, if you're putting all that money in commerce. And the induced jobs are when all those people and companies you just paid, when they go out and spend money at the dry cleaners, the restaurants, you know, the auto dealerships and all that, you know, that trickle down, your project, you know, gets the benefit from that, and that really ratchets up your job numbers. So imagine a project like Maryland Live that has all those new direct jobs from all the people that work there. It was a very long construction project, so they also got the construction jobs, plus, you know, I think it was a $500 or $600 million project, so their indirect and induced numbers were off the chart. So I think they, you know, they qualified for a very large number of EB5, but yeah, I think they capped it at 100 million, but I think they could have received about 300 million of EB5, but that made it a popular project because they could tell investors that, you know, we've exceeded your 10 jobs per investor by, you know, 300%, you know, and that makes it a good project. Is whenever, that's why I said, you know, we never let projects borrow up to the maximum. We always leave a delta in there because that becomes a selling tool that we could tell investors, look, we have more than your 10 jobs created here. You know, there's a cushion. Okay, so that's what a regional center is. It's just an LLC formed by, you know, a few entrepreneurs. It could be, you know, me and Lori. You don't have to be a unique person, a lawyer, or anybody. You know, anybody can form a regional center, but you have to put in the application to the USCIS, the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Service, and, you know, you need the help with someone experienced with EB5, and the approval time varies, you know, depending on, you know, how busy they are. In the last couple of years, I think for my clients, they've come back as fast as 5 months and as long as 12 months. It's really varied a little bit. And once you're approved, they really become an asset because, you know, you can use them over and over again. There's no such thing as, you know, a land grab. You know, there's no limit on how many regional centers can be in a certain area. You know, LA probably has, you know, 50. There's no limit. You know, there's enough business for everybody. But once they're up and running, you know, you can just do your own projects. You can just, you know, do other people's, you can rent them, you know, they become an asset to use over and over again. And there's all sorts of ways that, you know, you can use them. They're becoming popular to do, you know, public-private partnerships. You know, City of Dallas has a relationship with a regional center called Civitas. More and more housing authorities are working with regional centers for affordable housing. I'm working, you know, with several housing authorities, you know, to help them get more affordable access to capital and so forth. So that's really what a regional center is. It's just simply an entity that's applied for designation through the government, and then once it's approved, it's allowed to accept foreign investors' money and put it into a project over and over again.
Now, are there any country limitations on the funds, like meaning like where the funds come from, or from what country, or anything like that, or is it as long as it's, you know, provable, legitimate funds, then you're good to go?
That's right. There are no limitations. You know, there's every single investor will they will be checked on the OFAC list about 3 different times, actually. Initially by the migration agents abroad that are screening them, will check, their immigration lawyer will check, and then once their application's filed with Immigration Service, they'll be checked again. If they're coming from certain countries where there's bigger risk, there's a chance that their application might move a smidge slower, but people are come in all the time from what we might consider higher risk countries, and I don't know of any capricious denials.
Okay.
So on this next slide here, slide 8, we've already talked about it, pretty much, because I think I should move the slide. It's a smidge out of order here, but so direct jobs are either the full-time ones that or the construction jobs, but only if it's 24 months. I should tell you that there is a little bit of a secret, so in the residential space, so say you have you build homes, or you have a client that builds homes, and maybe you have one housing development that'll be finished in 14 months, and you have another one that'll be in 11 months. If you have the same contractor that's going to do both, and you can time them that the second project will start contemporaneous with the other one, so that there's no gap, you could write up the two together so that they're considered one project, even though they are separate, but you could write them up for EB5 purposes as one project if they're sort of in a similar area, and this way you could get credit for the construction jobs. The secret would be that there's no gap in the construction period, and that you have the same contractor on both projects. You don't have to show that Debbie's got a hammer for all 24 months. You just have to show that the same contractor is kept busy, the same company is kept busy for 24 months. And that's worked for several contractors. So if there's a contractor working in pick a city, Maryland, that's a way to ratchet up your job numbers on residential projects that sometimes tend to be smaller. Or I did a project outside of, in a suburb of Philadelphia. I forgot the name of it this second, but what he did is he was building these high-end homes in the suburb of Philadelphia. It was in a TEA still, and what he did is he was building the homes in segments. So he built maybe 10 or 12, and then was going to wait till some sold. First he was going to get prepare the ground, so that added X number of months, and then build the first set and wait for commitments, and then keep building. And that's how he got the construction period to exceed 24 months, although in reality, maybe the number of homes he was building wouldn't normally exceed it, but by doing it on a gradual basis, he was able to get construction over 24 months, and it made good economic sense that way, because he wasn't building too fast and having homes just sit there. That was another idea. And we've already talked about indirect and induced jobs, and that how they ratchet up the jobs in a regional center. So the beauty of a regional center is that, the indirect and induced jobs, we talked, so the investor, when they commit, it's just like any private offering. One investor, signs their subscription agreement, they must, they put in 100% of their investment, $1 million if it's not in a TEA, 500 if it is. Oh yeah, every investor, in addition to their capital contribution of $1 million or 500, they also pay an administrative fee. That's a non-refundable one-time fee that's not considered part of the capital contribution. Every penny of that $1 million or 500,000 must go to the project, but this admin fee is really for the regional center to recoup their costs associated with, setting up the project, and also finding the investor, because there's those marketing agents abroad that help you find investor, and the admin fee also you can use to compensate that. So right now, sort of the market rate of admin fee per investor is somewhere between $50,000 and $55,000, and so that's a nice help to sort of recoup your upfront costs, for the economist and legal and the foreign marketing fees and whatnot. And then once the investments come in, they can go to the project immediately. Usually we do what's called a holdback, maybe 10 or 20%. So say you're raising, $30 million for a project, we might do a 20% holdback. So you might keep $6 million in the escrow account until all of the investors' green card applications, initial ones, are approved. So if there's any denials, they can be refunded. The denial rate is very low. It's usually about 5 or 6%, and that's usually due to source of funds that the people just can't show how they got their money. Whereas in the U.S., showing that the money's been in your account for 25 years would be good enough to show that it's your money. For the EB5 program with foreign investors, that's not good enough. You have to show how it originally got there. Even if it's been there for 30 years, you still have to show that it originally arrived legally, through the sale of assets or something like that. But having your own regional center is good because the regional center administers the project, so it sets the terms, it sets the rate, and there's no middleman. So moving on. Okay, so this next slide, it talks about pros and cons of using an existing regional center. So what I mean by that is, if you, rather than forming your own, if you approach an existing one, so say you had a project coming up in Baltimore and you called me up and said, Deb, I don't know, should I form my own regional center or should I go to an existing one? And I would say, well, it's always great if you can find out, what their terms are. So I would suggest, giving a few of them a call and seeing, what terms they'll offer you. Why not make a decision with more information? So typically the benefits of using an existing one is that, you don't have to wait for the approval, rather than waiting until immigration, because it'll, comes back to you with an approval, which could be, I wrote an average of 9 months, because we could get lots of times in the last 18 months. I've gotten approvals as fast as 5 months, but sometimes 12. So I wrote an average of 9. Number 2 is that when you get money from a regional center, they're the ones that go out and, deal with the marketing agents and raise the money. And you don't have to do that. That was my third bullet point. The second one is, all you really have to do is negotiate the initial terms with the regional center of what the, how much the money is going to cost. It's usually 3 numbers. They'll give you what's the annual percentage of the cost of the money, what's the origination fee at the initial closing, and what upfront, legal costs they want from you. The downsides of going to an existing one is that obviously, the fees might not be that favorable, and the pace. I mean, you really can't control the pace. You don't know how, what their bandwidth is, how many other deals they're working on. Are they going to work at the pace you want them to? You have less control of the project. Now the origination fee right now, market is about 1.5% of the amount raised. That fee can be avoided if you're running the show yourself. And obviously there's going to be a profit spread there. So as I mentioned, the amount of EB5 investors these days is mostly 0.5%. Sometimes you see 1%. Marketing fees tend to be about 1 to 3%. And so then the regional center wants to make some money for their time and effort. So that really bumps the cost of the money up. And probably the final thing is, if you go to an existing regional center, you miss the chance to set up your own for future projects. If you don't envision doing future projects, or maybe not doing future projects in that existing area, that's when it makes more sense to go to an arm's length one. And so obviously the advantages of creating your own is that having a regional center versus a direct investment certainly having a regional center adds more legitimacy than a direct investment because they know it's been scrutinized by immigration. After your regional center has been approved, you don't have to the regional center first going forward. So once you receive your approval and now you have another project, you can just, put the paperwork together and immediately go to fundraising. You don't have to go back to immigration again for pre-approval. They'll approve your project when it's attached to the investor's paperwork on their green card application, which is nice. So, in the future, once you're approved, the clip is much faster. You see projects, you call up your attorney, you say, hey, I got my next project. You put the paperwork together, which is now faster after you have your first set, and you can go to market much faster. And also, the obvious things, you can cut out the middleman, and also, the geography of your regional center can keep growing. How it's determined initially is from that economist report. If the larger the project, the bigger the initial scope. So if your project's in Prince George's County and it's small, your initial scope might be, PG County, DC, maybe a few Northern Virginia counties, maybe a couple counties adjacent to PG County. If it's bigger, like 50, 60 million, you might be all the way past Montgomery County, West Virginia, all around. But you can keep growing from that. If your next project is in, like on the outskirts of your geographic area, your next economist report would grow, it kind of mushroom out from there. And you can keep growing as long as it's contiguous. A regional center counties must always touch, but it can keep growing. I have a client in the Philly area. When I first started working with them a couple summers ago, they had 3 counties, and now they have like 30 because it's more serendipitous. The projects they've been finding have been sort of keep being on the perimeter of their area, and it keeps kind of mushrooming out, and it just keeps growing that way. And the main disadvantages of creating your own regional center, I think I've already covered, but just is that, sometimes you have to wait a while. So if you came to me and said, Deb, we have this project in Baltimore, should I create my own regional center? Should I rent one? Should I get an arm's length investment for one? The first thing I would say is, well, the very first question I would ask you is, how soon do you need the money? And can you bridge it another way? If you said, look, I need to raise, 15 million with EB5, and we've determined that, you can cover that readily with, you have enough job numbers, and, and he said, oh, I need it in 6 months, definitely, I would say, well, forming your own is not the best in this situation unless you can bridge it somehow. And you say, yeah, I actually do. I know this group that, would happily bridge it for me for 6 months to a year. That I would say you're okay, because it's completely permitted to use EB5 money to take out bridge money. So that's an option. If you said, no, I don't have any sources, I need it in 6 months, then I would take forming a regional center off the table and suggest that you either rent one or go to an arm's length one, because you want something, you want a plan where you can hit the ground running now. The other disadvantages of forming a regional center is that when you first start, you really don't have the marketing agent contacts, but call me. I have lots and lots and lots of referrals. I have literally dozens and dozens of contacts of marketing agents around the world. Whenever I hear of new ones, I just jot them down, and so I can help you with introductions. It used to be cheaper to raise money abroad, but the marketing agents abroad have become more savvy, and they have increased their fees because they saw that the regional centers were really, making a killing on this. They were charging them, they were paying the investors low fees and making a larger delta, so the fees have increased. But I think it's like a bell curve. There's more foreign agents coming into this field, and as a result, the fees have gone down. So it's actually not as bad as it was. Just have a few slides left. I just want to say, it's not the Wild West out there. For anyone on the listening in who hadn't heard of EB5 or wonder, is this all the Wild West? It's really not. It's very popular. It became really more popular since the last recession, and when access to capital was so heavily hindered and people were really looking around for alternative sources. Since 2008, and I think my statistic is actually a few months old, but since 2008, $12 billion has come in through the EB5 program. So, it's definitely very established. And I got this, my bottom bullet is a new statistic. Philadelphia, it's very popular in that city, and the public-private partnerships have $620 million in completed projects. I have a $100 million EB5 project that'll get done later this year in EB5 on a 4-city block area that is going to do a lot of good. So it's a great program, and while it's had a few bumps in the road, for the most part, it's turned blighted neighborhoods and rural areas, and it's done a lot of infrastructure projects. I did a big project in Staten Island, where it was taking soil out to allow larger ships to come in. It's done work on the Pennsylvania Turnpike. So it does more than just hotels and casinos. It actually does infrastructure projects as well that saves, city, state, and federal government money as well. EB5 can coexist with other programs. I've done EB5 with HUD loans, low-income housing tax credits, historic tax credits, and new market tax credits, and TIFs and revenue bonds. I just closed a deal a couple weeks ago for a new law enforcement, this is publicly available, for a new law enforcement museum in DC with the revenue bonds and EB5. So it's very flexible. I think we talked about everything else on this slide. Yep, that's it. So any more questions in the time we have left?
Yes, we do have quite a few questions. Let me try to get through a couple of them here. What types of costs are typically associated with creating a regional center?
There's only 3. There's a one-time filing fee that's $6,230 to the Immigration Department. It's payable to the Department of Homeland Security, and that's a one-time fee. Right now, there's no ongoing annual fee to have a regional center. It's a one-time only, $6,230. You need the economist report that you need for every project, but to file for a new one, you'll need one. And like I said, and those vary 12 to 15,000 depending on which economist you work with. And then there's the legal fee to put the project, to put the application together. And a regional center application, there's 3 types. There's what's called exemplar, actual, and hypothetical. A hypothetical is when you don't have a project ready yet, so you can use a past project or one in your pipeline that's not ripe yet, or just make one up, but you still need to write it up as though it's real and get an economist report. An actual is one where it is in your pipeline and you want to do it, but you still might want to make changes to the application. An exemplar is when you want your project pre-approved without any, and you're never going to make changes. And so the amount of work involved is pretty much the same for all 3. The price will vary, somewhat law firm by law firm, and how much the client is helpful, because each application needs, every project, the most important document is, besides the economic report, is a business plan for the project, and you need a business plan for the regional center, and your counsel will help with that. You also need a private offering memorandum and documents. But on average, you know, at least at my firm, if the client's very helpful and can provide a lot of information, we can usually do it in the 60, 70 range, thousand, sometimes less if the client can produce a lot of information, but rarely more than that. And some law firms might be less, and the bigger law firms are often more.
Okay, there's another question here. I think you may have touched on this. If you have to have a project in place already prior to making application for a regional center.
Not necessarily if you use the hypothetical. So a lot of my clients, you know, because of the time to wait for approval, they want to get in the queue, so they do the hypothetical, because then the immigration really doesn't spend time on, you know, analyzing your project. They just really scrutinize, you know, the people behind the project and sort of what your general goals are. So the approval time tends to be a couple months faster, and it's a way of getting in the queue faster rather than waiting until you really do have a real project. So we'll write up a past project they've done, or one that, you know, they might want to do in the future, but it's not ripe yet. So we'll use, you know, best guess numbers. I know it sounds confusing, but it's true. You know, because it still has to look like a real project on a hypothetical. So we put it together. So if most clients have used past projects, or even current ones that don't have EB5 on them for the hypothetical.
And there are a few questions here related to the visa. Are there limitations in terms of, is it applicable to just the investor himself? What about family? Like, how many family members could also fall under this program?
It's spouse and children, so long as they have not attained the age of 21.
Okay.
And I don't believe there's a limit on the number of children. That's more on the immigration lawyer side. I'm more on the business side, but I don't think there's a limit on children as long as they haven't turned 21.
Okay, and this may be more of an immigration-related question as well, but is there opportunity to turn the EB5 into visa? Is the EB5 visa into, they say true green card. I'm guessing that means like a permanent citizen status.
Oh, absolutely. And in fact, I mentioned that earlier. You know, once so how things work is, you know, on the investor side is, once you see the project paperwork, you know, you see the business plan for the project and the offering memorandum and all the paperwork. You say, okay, I like this one. You fill out the paperwork. You wire your $500,000 to the escrow account. You pay your admin fee to the regional center, and you file a form called an I-526. That's your petition for green card, and attached to it is all the paperwork that your, you know, hardworking lawyer, you know, securities lawyer Debbie Klis filled out, and so this, and you know, all your personal paperwork that shows how you earned your money, all that gets filed to immigration, and it takes you know, 8 to 12 months for that to be adjudicated. And once it is, then you apply for your visa. So within 18 months of subscribing for an investment, you can move here. And then within 21 months of that initial green card approval, that's when you file a second form called an I-829, and that's when you show that the jobs were created. And the region you're working with helps you with that paperwork. And once that's approved, you can stay here forever. But once you've been in the country a total of 5 years, that's when you can apply for citizenship. So it's an automatic right to citizenship, and it's not, you know what I mean, it's automatic as soon as you've been here 5 years.
Very good. There's a number of questions here that really are looking for more. This may be more expansive than we can get into right now, but is there a resource or a website or something out there that provides kind of a point-by-point procedure for setting up a regional center? Or is that something that they would really just need to contact an attorney and go through?
Well, I could talk about it real quick. I mean, it's, you know, a regional center application. The form is called an I924. So if you Google that, I924, you can see what's required for it. And it needs the economist report and the filing fee. It needs a business plan for the project, and it needs a business plan for the regional center, and it needs, a PPM, and it needs all the offering documents that would go to an investor. So an investor would expect to see a subscription agreement, an investor questionnaire. If the money would go to the project as a loan, it would expect to see the loan documents. If the money is going in as equity, the EB5 investors' money always comes in as equity. It's an at-risk investment. It's statutorily required that EB5 investors' money is at risk. But once it comes in the regional center, how it gets deployed into a project could be debt or equity. That's something that's sort of structured at the local level. As the government doesn't care, the government never gets involved in your business decision. How you structure the investment, what the rate is, what the admin fee is, all that is our business decisions that the government stays out of. That's what, as long as it's disclosed. So, but if you take a look at the I-924 form, that will help. And yes, there's a ton of information on the internet that will, if you just Google I-924 application, that will cover more detail that I wasn't able to.
Is there a list somewhere out there of existing regional centers in a particular area?
Yes, just Google. Yeah, it's on it's on the immigration website. Google these exact words: USCIS, so Union Sister, California Ice Cream Sister, USCIS approved regional centers. That will take you to the USCIS website, and on the home, but on the page that will pull up. In fact, I'll do it myself on my. I have two computers open. USCIS approved. Yeah, I've done it so many times. It'll be the very first thing that pops up. Scroll down the page, and you'll see a search box, and just put the state you want. Like if you put in Maryland in that search box, Maryland, if I could spell, you'll see that you'll see just the ones from Maryland. Now, which counties within Maryland they're approved in, that you can't see. You'd have to contact them, to see if they're approved in the area you want, because they wouldn't be permitted to do a project in an area that they're not approved in. However, going back to what I said earlier, say they were approved 1 or 2 counties away from where you are, it's possible that your project would close that gap, and they could do it anyway, but that's a little complicated. Any other questions? We probably have time for one more.
I converse to that. Is there some type of a way for developers to find EB5 investors who are looking for projects? Only through the foreign marketing agents. You have to have your paperwork. Once you have your paperwork in order, we can make introductions. So you have to have everything in order first. You know what I mean? They're not. There's no shortage of projects, but there's also no shortage. There's no shortage of investors either. So now,
there's.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying there's so they're not sitting around waiting for their next project to come, but there's also no shortage of investors, but they're not going to talk to you until you have proper paperwork. So they want to see the business plan and the PPM, and they want to see your slide materials, and they want it presented properly.
Sure. Now I have someone here who made a comment that says they were told by one regional center that they're only allowed to pay a broker overseas. So how can local real estate agents, make money or get paid by being involved in this process?
That's 100% true. Since 1933, you know, our broker-dealer rules prohibit non-broker dealers from placing securities. So if you're looking to, you know, be a middleman between, you know, an EB5 project and foreign investors, you would need a broker-dealer's license. I don't think that was the purpose of this webinar. It wasn't for Maryland realtors to become, you know, brokers of EB5 projects to foreign investors. It was more how EB5, you know, financing might help, you know, projects, you know. But yeah, you would need a broker-dealer's license or work with a broker-dealer. Or, yeah, you can't accept a success-based fee for placing securities without a broker-dealer's license.
Okay, now there's actually a ton more questions than we could ever possibly hope to have time for now. And I'm seeing actually a lot of the same names asking numerous questions. So I'm looking at you, Mark,
please call me or email me.
And Laylee. There's a number of names on my list here of people who have lots of questions. So I would encourage you guys that have really specific questions to go ahead and contact Debbie directly, and that she can help you out. And just based on
it's my pleasure. It's no charge. I'm happy to talk to you. It's no charge at all. No worries.
And based on the amount of questions here, you know, I've got a couple people that want really just a kind of a for dummies version, breaking it down step by step. So I'll explore, you know, what other opportunities we may have for you to get the information out to our members. But I want everybody, you know, to take a note of Debbie's information there for some of these questions. And I appreciate you sharing this information with us, Debbie, and I appreciate everybody out there on the phone who has joined us today.
Lori, can you just mention again what Debbie's email address is, as well as our website address for some people that may have questions?
Yes, absolutely. Our website is mdrealtor.org, and this information will be posted on the website for review. Debbie's email address is klisd@ballardspar.com, and that's BALLARDSPAHR. And please, again, my name is Lori Benner. I'm here at the Maryland Association of Realtors, so you can always email. You can contact me here as well, and I'll put you in touch with, you know, whoever I need to get you the information that you need.
All right, thank you so much. Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.